This podcast may contain explicit language. A census taker once tried to test me. I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti. The Silence of the Lambs is next. Welcome to the Greatest Movie of All Time podcast, the show that uses a unique grading style to redefine what the greatest movies are. I'm Tom Duncan.
And I'm Dana Duncan.
Seriously? I thought for sure you would have come in like Hannibal Lecter in this one and tried to like make some big joke out of it, be extra creepy.
I thought about it. I actually practiced it, and then I didn't. I was even going to end it by going... So...
Again, out of context, if somebody just clipped out your part and just like put that on blast on social, that would be so bad. But given the fact that quite literally, as a kid for at least a dozen years, you would come up behind us as children and say, "Hello, Clarice." I'm surprised at you. That's all.
Yes.
Okay. Tonight, for our 306th episode, we revisit the Best Picture winner of 1991, The Silence of the Lambs, which celebrated its 35th anniversary earlier this year, directed by Jonathan Demme, written by Ted Talley, cinematography by Tak Fujimoto, music by Howard Shore, editing by Craig McKay, starring Jodie Foster as Clarice Starling, Masha Skorobogatov, as young Clarice, Anthony Hopkins as Dr. Hannibal Lecter. I did not practice that previous name, and I apologize. Scott Glenn as Jack Crawford, Ted Levine as Jame, Buffalo Bill Gum. Also, who names their kid Jame? It's not James or Jamie or just Jame. I don't know, whatever. Anthony Heald as Dr. Frederick Chilton, Brooke Smith as Catherine Martin, and Diane Baker as U.S. Senator Ruth Martin. Background for the movie: The Silence of the Lambs was wide released on February 14th, 1991. On a budget of $19 million, The Silence of the Lambs grossed over $130 million to finish number 4 at the worldwide box office for 1991. The film was widely acclaimed at the time, and it was nominated for 7 Oscars, including Sound and Film Editing. It is also one of only 3 films to win the prestigious Big Five Oscars for Best Picture, Director for Jonathan Demme, Actor for Anthony Hopkins, Actress for Jodie Foster, and Adapted Screenplay for Ted Talley. In 2006, the Writers Guild of America West ranked its screenplay 61st in its list of the greatest screenplays. In the same year, at the Key Arts Awards, the original poster for The Silence of the Lambs was nominated for Best Film Poster of the past 35 years. The Silence of the Lambs placed 7th on Bravo's 100 Scariest Movie Moments for Lechter's escape scene. In 2011, ABC aired Best in Film, The Greatest Movies of Our Time, where The Silence of the Lambs was selected as the best suspense thriller and Dr. Hannibal Lecter was selected as the 4th greatest film character. In 2024, Far Out magazine named the role one of the 10 most accurate movie psychopaths according to the FBI, and What Culture included the role in the top 10 most convincing movie psychopath performances. In 2012, the Motion Picture Editors Guild listed as the 26th best edited film of all time based on a survey of its membership. In 2015, Entertainment Weekly's 25th anniversary year, it included The Silence of the Lambs in its list of the 25 best movies made since the beginning of the magazine. In 2018, Empire ranked it 48th on its list of the 500 greatest movies of all time. The film and its characters have appeared in the following AFI 100 Years lists: AFI's 100 Years, 100 Movies at number 65, AFI's 100 Years, 100 Thrills at number 5. For AFI's 100 Years, 100 Heroes and Villains, we had the number 6 hero in Clarice Starling and the number 1 villain of all time in Hannibal Lecter. AFI's 100 Years, 100 Movie Quotes had number 21, "A census taker once tried to test me. I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti," at number 21. The film had multiple sequels, including Hannibal from 2001, the prequel sequel Red Dragon from 2002, and Hannibal Rising from 2007. A TV series starring Mads Mikkelsen was also done between 2013 and 2015. The Silence of the Lambs was selected for preservation in the National Film Registry in 2011. It also placed number 22 on the Cinema Legacy poll in 2025. The Silence of the Lambs has a 95% among critics on Rotten Tomatoes, an 86 score on Metacritic, and a 4.3 out of 5 on Letterboxd. Now, of course, we can't do this by ourselves, so we bring in our returning celebrity guest, the host, or co-host, will you, of the War Starts at Midnight podcast, a CLP contributor, a 5-time club member making his 15th appearance on the show to date. It's the Hotlanta hotshot of hospitality. Please welcome back Peterson W. Hill.
Good hype up today. Ready to jump in and talk a little Hannibal Lecter, a little Clarice Starling.
Yeah.
It's going to be a fun one.
It's nice to take a break from moving, isn't it?
It is. It is very nice.
Even if you don't have the proper equipment tonight.
You know, honestly, I'm looking over. No idea where my wife's computer is. No idea.
It happens. I'm just teasing it out initially, so in case anybody complains about the quality of your recording.
I got my mic, but there's nothing to plug it into because it's not the right computer.
So it's just flaccid there. You have a flaccid mic.
Yeah.
There you go, Clarice.
Yes, hello, Thomas.
Just don't throw any goo at the screen. Okay. Well, you were with us only a couple of weeks ago, so no need to immediately check in with you. So we'll dive right into the movie. Dad, what is your relationship with this film?
Well, to start with, I read the book because my next door neighbor, who I shared a common driveway with, was raving about this book, and he handed it to me and said, "You need to read this." So I read it. So I was familiar with the story, and then I saw that they were making it into a film, and I thought, yeah, it's going to be pretty good. But, of course, your mother and anything with suspense or horror were not compatible. So it was a couple of years before I got to see it because there was no way she was going to go to the theater and see it. And she wouldn't let me rent it. I couldn't even watch it if she was home. So I had to wait until she was gone to watch it.
I find this funny because she is like one of those ladies, well, frankly, most ladies get into like the whole true crime thing, and she watches stuff that I think is a lot worse than this movie is. And she did eventually watch this completely unprompted on her own while she was staying in quarantine during a potential COVID scare in like 2021 or something.
Something
I don't know.
like that.
She ironically watched both Memento and The Silence of the Lambs like back to back, and she can't remember watching either of them, but she did watch them. So, for whatever it's worth. Continuing to layer on that my mother never remembers anything that she's ever seen, but...
And those are two pretty memorable films. Even if you don't like them per se, they're both pretty memorable.
Yeah.
I don't know. Sometimes I wonder if she remembers who I am.
Yeah, she knows who to yell at. Okay, but anyway, Peterson, what's your relationship?
So this is a movie growing, born in 86, too young to see it in theaters, sadly. So I still have not done that to this day, but it's a movie that I remember walking past in Blockbuster and just being like, that's an adult movie. It's got Best Picture winner right on the VHS cover, and walking past it just being like, one day I'm going to watch that. And I was probably 12 or 13 when I finally dove in and did it. Was just like blown away by it. It was one of the first kind of movies I really sought out and knew that I was going to enjoy it, or like knew I was at least going to wrestle with it per se. Kind of immediately bought the DVD when I got a DVD player for my TV in my room, and I've seen it, 15 times probably. I think it's a compulsively rewatchable movie, is kind of dark and as brooding as it is. I think it's also really fun. I think Hopkins is part of it. Like, he's playing a monster, but you can't take your eyes off of him. He's so good. And I think Jonathan Demme is he's just one of the best we ever had.
So I believe that I watched this about a decade ago for the first time, roughly when I was just kind of randomly crossing stuff off of the Best Picture winners list as I was kind of working my way through that project. And I don't remember this being like near the end of my project for that, so I want to say this is probably a somewhere between 2014 and 2016 watch for me. It always had this aura around it, partially because my dad built this movie up. And so there were certain taglines, like he kept repeating the Chianti line for years. He did the whole, he'd sneak up behind you, hello, Clarice, or he'd do the tongue flick just randomly in the middle of shit. Yes.
Well,
anyway,
one of our exchange students and I watched Red Dragon when it was
Red
released.
Dragon?
Yes, it was with Ralph Fiennes, if I remember correctly.
He is the Tooth Fairy.
Yeah, and of course Hopkins was in that. So I went and blew up a picture of him and printed it off the computer, and I snuck into her room and pasted it on the wall. So when she woke up, that's the first thing she saw.
People might call that assault. Okay. Anyway, yeah. Let's admit to that all these years later.
Oh, she knew I did it. And
well, I know she knew you did it. She just did not avail herself of the justice system.
Mom was right there. She was standing
Oh, yeah.
there.
That's the beacon of all justice is my mother, who fancies herself an attorney. She's got an MD and a JD. Just ask her. Anyway. But it had this built-up mystique around it as being like this truly horrific and terrifying movie, so that when I actually watched it for the first time, I'm like, this is supposed to be like the horror film that won Best Picture and made a big deal about it. I don't know. Maybe I had gotten to the point where I was a bit desensitized, and frankly, unless it's like the true slasher films or some of the modern horror stuff that's like definitely, I feel like those are made in an AI lab to try and get the most out of everybody who's been completely desensitized to all the like previous horror films. That stuff would scare the living tar out of me. Like, I would not have any urine left in my body. It would be all down my pant leg. But this, to me, really wasn't that big a deal.
Well, they pulled back on it from the book. If you read the book was much more graphic.
Well, there's a reason that Demme and Foster didn't come back for the sequels. They didn't want to do those because they were supposedly much more violent.
Well, and also, when you watch this movie, yes, it is scary, but it's more the kind of horror that gets under your skin. It really, like, you think about it, there's only one really, like, I guess two really violent scenes. It's the gymnasium kind of escape, and then it's the ending with Buffalo Bill. Otherwise, there's not much violence.
No.
I mean, it's a lot of images of violence and a lot of images
yes.
of, the aftermath violence, but it's, Demme, he's not showing you a lot. And I think that's part of the thing is, if you're the person who watches a movie and really lets something burrow inside of you, this can be really scary. But also, modern horror, I think Weapons was an exception, but a lot of modern horror is all about, I'm going to scare you right now in the moment, but then, the next morning I wake up and I'm like, I don't have any of that feeling. Silence of the Lambs sticks with you. It stays with you in a way that other modern horror movies don't.
That's interesting. I guess I don't have anything to compare that with, and I'd be curious if other people felt the same. I guess I've never heard that before. But either way, I think there's at least a good case to be made that coming out of this movie, and as well as it placed, I mean, it wasn't the top grossing film of the year, but it was in that upper range. And the buzz surrounding it, especially in the 90s where Best Picture winners were usually tied to very popular movies, that America's fascination with serial killers really kind of manifested after this movie came out. Now, is it directly responsible? I don't know, because I was 1 year old when this movie came out. But Unsolved Mysteries came out like in the wake of this. And then you have all these other true crime shows. And by the end of the decade, we're getting CSI and we're getting all of these different things. I mean,
talk about some scary shit. Unsolved Mysteries.
Oh, God.
My parents would be out, and they would be on date night. They'd be away, and I watched that by myself. And they're downstairs, lights off, and then it'd be like, they were never found. I'm like, what?
That show scared the shit out of me. I thought for at least 4 years, when they moved me into the basement, and my bedroom was across the hall, and like you had to shut off all the lights from the back end, that the Unabomber was living in my mother's office adjacent my bedroom door.
You
and he was going to come get. Yes.
You talked about this on the Silence of the Lambs episode before. So
Yeah.
I was like,
all I'd have to do is put on the music and he'd run from the room screaming.
Yeah. It was the creepiest fucking show.
He couldn't almost watch Airplane because Robert Stack was in it.
True story. His mere appearance just scared the shit out of me. But anyway, that was a creepy fucking show. But the point still stands. I think that this movie, at least, if not directly responsible, is a contributory factor that America's true crime and serial killer fascination manifests out of.
I think as entertainment, yes. But they've been fascinated for a long time because there was huge deal over Ed Gein, the Boston Strangler.
But those were more regional. I don't know if they were national.
No, it was national. I mean, it was national. It was getting national. When Ed Gein's trial was going on, there wasn't a hotel capable of holding people in Watoma. So the New York Times, the UP, the Wall Street Journal, all had reporters in Wisconsin Rapids at the Hotel Meade because that's where they stayed. So they had national coverage for his trial.
Okay.
So it's been a fascination for a long time, but as entertainment, yes.
So are you saying that has more to do then with like Psycho, if it's going back that far?
I think Psycho tapped into it because, of course, Psycho took its leave from Ed Gein. I mean,
right.
About that time, the Boston Strangler, and they did a movie of that with Tony Curtis. And then they had the whole Son of Sam in the 70s and such. So
the Zodiac, yeah.
Yep, those. They've always had a fascination. And then there was the whole fascination with Ted Bundy and all that.
Helter Skelter.
So it's been around. It's just they've made it into entertainment.
Well, the same year as Psycho was also Peeping Tom, which is, I think, a very good movie. I like quite a bit. Michael Powell film. And that movie was banned in America because it was supposedly so violent and so upsetting. And I think part of the mystique builds around movies like that. And people are like, well, what is it? You know, I have to see it, which is kind of the mystique around this movie. People are like, you won't get, like, this is crazy. This is so, you have to witness it. And people build it up in their mind, and then they go see it, and they're like, oh, that was good. And, you know, I would say Hannibal Lecter is probably one of the most 5 or 6 most known characters in film.
It's quite possible. I think he's up there with
Indiana Jones,
probably Darth
Luke
Vader.
Skywalker, Vader.
I think Darth Vader's more known than Luke Skywalker.
Yeah, Vader's more known than Skywalker. So yeah, I'd say Vader's your guy in Star Wars.
Han Solo might also, like,
They're close.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. John Wayne, but that's not like a character. That's just like him being.
Him,
but that's
yeah, him
that's a
being John.
star type of thing. So I don't know, but yeah, he's probably up there as a singular character. That's for sure. I'm trying to think of who else would necessarily be in there. I guess in a modern sense, like the Joker, because it's been portrayed so many times by so many different people anymore.
And I guess you'd probably default to saying Ledger's the representation of the Joker.
It depends on whom you are. For some people, it's Nicholson. For some people, it's Cesar Romero. For some people, it's Mark Hamill.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to think of Rain Man, Dustin Hoffman's character.
I don't think that gets up there nearly as much.
Especially not now. Not now.
I'm trying to think of
Dracula or Frankenstein, those are...
Does Tom Hanks's Woody from Toy Story get up there? Do we have like a certain animated franchise character?
It'd probably be Buddy and Woods. Yeah, both of them.
If you're going to go animated, then it's Bugs Bunny.
Yeah, but I guess that technically falls into film because there have been some Looney Tunes films. But yeah, I don't know. It would be interesting to make a like most well-known characters in the history of cinema kind of list. And then you'd have to go like do a man on the street type of situation where you're like, have you heard of these 10 characters?
Yeah. Would be interesting.
It'd be a nice, fun, like summer project type of situation. But anyway, I digress. All right, so then, Dad, do you have our plot summary ready for us?
Yes. In The Silence of the Lambs, Clarice Starling, Jodie Foster, plays a young FBI trainee assigned to interview a brilliant but dangerous imprisoned killer, Hannibal Lecter, Anthony Hopkins. As Clarice seeks insight to catch another serial murder, Buffalo Bill, Ted Levine, she enters a tense psychological game with Lechter, who offers cryptic clues in exchange for personal revelations. As the investigation deepens, Clarice must confront both the external threat and her own past fears. Lechter's chilling intelligence and manipulation blur the line between helper and predator, building towards a suspenseful and unsettling climax.
Thank you, Dad. What is this film about?
The obvious would be serial killers, but I think it's not just that. The one thing I've found is I've gotten older is that there's a lot of things that you experience in your life, both good and bad, that end up becoming influential or intricate in the in your life or in your profession. In this particular case, her fears is what helps, or Clarice's fears from childhood, I think, is what drives her in her professional circumstances. And the one thing Lechter does by this, Silence of the Lambs, is that once she's achieved this situation, she can take satisfaction that she has reached the point where she can actually accept that she's arrived. And I think that that's part of it, is it's that underlying motivation that a lot of people have that drive them to whatever heights they want to reach.
You're talking about a crucible moment. I think this is much more wide ranging than you're limiting it to just her character, because it's not just her character, but we're talking Buffalo Bill has a bunch of unresolved childhood trauma. He's inflicting essentially young or youthful trauma on all of his female victims. I think there are themes of sexual violence in this. There are themes of predatory behavior, because whether you want to talk about Lechter or you want to talk about Jack Crawford, because I know that's not theoretically explored in the movie, but isn't it in the book that he like has a relationship or comes on to Clarice and he's like 20 years older than she is?
Yeah, his wife had died.
There's a lot of weird predatory behavior among all the male figures in this towards the female characters writ large.
Yeah, for me, this is a movie all about identity. And obviously, whether that be Buffalo Bill or Clarice, I think Hannibal's pretty comfortable with his own identity. He knows who he is. But Clarice is certainly still trying to figure that out. And it is about, one, her own identity, but also the identity that people assign to her from being a woman. And
Yeah.
that is also then juxtaposed with Buffalo Bill, who is, as they say in the movie, he is not transsexual. He is not part of the transgender community. He is essentially trying to map onto that because of all of his own confusion. He's so confused, he has no idea who he is. And he's truly trying to craft a suit to be somebody else. Crafting from their body parts, their skin. So he is looking for his own identity, his own individuality, any way he can. And he's using, obviously, I would say, a method that is questionable. And
That's a little generous.
which is why I think this is such a intriguing film. It's why it works so well, because you have three completely different characters who all kind of feed off each other and need each other in some way. And it's perfect. This movie is basically perfect.
Now, going back to the original episode that you alluded to before, we have not revisited or we have not visited this movie in almost 6 years. We did this during our first season, where it was episode, I believe, number 21, and came out in July. And we are now coming back to it. Exploring that original episode, this next section, our most popular section, Did You Know?, was not a part of the show at that time. So this is completely fresh and new. Did you know? Jodie Foster claims that during the first meeting between Dr. Hannibal Lecter and Clarice Starling, Sir Anthony Hopkins' mocking of her southern accent was improvised on the spot. Foster's horrified reaction was genuine, since she felt personally attacked. She later thanked Hopkins for generating such an honest reaction. That sounds like a Jodie Foster thing. Did you know? After Lecter was moved from Baltimore, the plan was to dress him in a yellow or orange jumpsuit. Sir Anthony Hopkins convinced director Jonathan Demme and costume designer Colleen Atwood that the character would seem more clinical and unsettling if he was dressed in pure white. Hopkins has since said that he got the idea from his fear of dentists.
The American Dental Association probably enjoyed that.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, there are a lot of people that have fear of dentists. Did you know? When characters are talking to Starling, Jodie Foster, they often talk directly to the camera. When she is talking to them, she's always looking slightly off camera. Director Jonathan Demme has explained that this was done so as the audience would directly experience her point of view, but not theirs, hence encouraging the audience to more readily identify with her.
Demme loves his close-ups.
That he does. Did you know? One of the inspirations from whom Sir Anthony Hopkins borrowed for his interpretation of Dr. Hannibal Lecter was a friend of his in London who rarely blinked when speaking, which unnerved anyone around him. I mean, yeah. The eye intensity is always how you make anybody feel extra uncomfortable. And finally, did you know? When Sir Anthony Hopkins found out that he was cast as Dr. Hannibal Lecter based on his performance as Dr. Frederick Treves, I think that's right, Treves, excuse me. In The Elephant Man from 1980, he questioned Jonathan Demme and said, but Dr. Treves was a good man. To which Demme replied, so is Lecter, he is a good man too, just trapped in an insane mind. Food for thought. And so with that, we will take our first break, and we'll be right back. Before we jump back into the episode, next week for our 307th episode, we welcome back five-time club member and CLP contributor, host and creator of the Best Picture cast, Kieran B., to discuss A Place in the Sun from 1951, celebrating its 75th anniversary. Directed by George Stevens, written by Michael Wilson and Harry Brown, cinematography by William C. Meller, music by Franz Waxman, editing by William Hornbeck, starring Montgomery Clift, Elizabeth Taylor, and Shelley Winters. You won't want to miss that one, so watch ahead of the show by searching the Real Good app to find where it's streaming for you. That's REELGOOD. And before we move any further, let's check in with our guest. Peterson, what is going on with you, and where can people find you?
Yeah, life is so crazy right now. I'm basically doing these. Nothing really lined up other than this at the moment. I've thought about doing some things at Psycho Drive-In, do a couple articles, but haven't had the time to really jump in. But yeah, catching up on old podcasts and packing away my house.
Yeah. Did you find something else already?
Not yet.
No.
Yeah.
Okay.
The market's so unsteady right now that we're going to wait and sell this, so we're not sitting on this house for that much longer.
Okay. That takes us to our monthly GMOAT Hall of Fame. If you've never been with us before for our Hall of Fame, there are two primary requirements. One, that you fit into one of the primary categories that we have here, such as actor, producer, director, writer, casting, whatever that you did, and that you worked on at least 5 films that we've covered during the life of the show. To this point, I think we have 30-some different entrants into our current Hall of Fame. Actually, I probably should have that number in front of me. So,
How many actresses? How many do you have?
0 actresses.
Okay. I was wondering if it was still 0.
Yeah, we do not have a single actress, and we only had 1 nominated, and it was rejected by my co-host.
Oh, it was Carrie Fisher.
That is correct. We have 4 producers, 8 directors, 12 actors, 0 actresses, 2 screenwriters, 0 cinematographers, 3 editors, 7 composers, 2 different art directors, 1 costume designer, and 1 casting director to this point. But tonight, we will be putting in at least 1. I would assume one of these is like a for sure, no doubt, going to get in absolutely entrant this evening, but I have 3 for your consideration. So, for your consideration, we have a casting director, we have a prominent actor, and we do have at least 1 and a new category. We have a cinematographer. So, dealer's choice, where should we start?
Do the cinematographer.
Okay. This man has worked on films such as Memento, Batman Begins, The Dark Knight, Inception, and The Dark Knight Rises. He did win an Oscar for Inception. I give you Wally Pfister. Any disagreement?
No, I think he's a good entrant. I don't know. He hasn't done anything recently, has he?
No, I think he did retire now because Nolan is working with a different cinematographer.
Yeah, Hoyt van Hoytema.
Yeah, Hoyt van Hoytema.
Yeah.
Who's been doing most of his stuff since Interstellar. I think Dark Knight Rises might be the last one that Pfister did.
And then he went off and made his own directorial effort.
Yeah.
Transcendence with Johnny Depp.
Oh, that's right.
We all saw that, right?
Produced. Yeah, okay. I think I watched more of the Depp trial than I watched of that movie. And that was not very much. Anyway. But all right, so we have our first cinematographer, and we're slowly filling out our Hall of Fame. So that means we only do not have anybody in the category of actress now.
I think I'm going to have to break down and have the old-timers group come out and say, and resurrect her nomination like they do in baseball when they fail to vote somebody in who should have gotten in to begin with.
Jodie Foster's got to be close, right?
No. Jodie Foster's only got 3.
Inside Man? Okay.
Yes, and Taxi Driver. So those are the 3. I went and looked. I added her to the short list to take a look. I mean, There are some people that if we cover the right movies could get in there, but just not there.
Well, you could do a 32 anniversary. Scott called it The River Wild today. He was talking about that for his hot movie take. Meryl Streep gets her in, maybe.
Okay.
He argued it's her best performance.
I don't think we've covered to this point a single Meryl Streep movie.
Deer Hunter? No?
Nope, not yet. That's
next
on
year,
the
yeah.
list for
Kramer.
next year. We have not covered Kramer versus Kramer.
You're looking to fill Deer Hunter. I can fill Deer Hunter.
Okay, if you want to take that on for your 9th episode next year. At that point, why don't we just put you as like the optional third co-host?
No. There's plenty of people who do 9.
Anyway, but no, I don't think we've covered a single one of hers. We didn't end up scheduling Devil Wears Prada. I think it lost out to something else. I think there was like a big movie that shared the same anniversary or something. It wasn't the same year, but it was like roughly around the same date, and I couldn't fit it into the schedule. Even with the sequel coming out this year in a couple of weeks, actually. I think it's 4 weeks away. That sounds about right.
It's earlier than I thought it was. Yeah, I thought it was more June, like the first one, but I think it's, yeah.
But we haven't covered The Iron Lady. We haven't covered Florence Foster Jenkins. We haven't, I mean, there are so many Streep roles that like people love and remember, but it's not for like seminal movies. We haven't covered Sophie's Choice. So, yeah.
Yeah, you know, I guess she is kind of she is the reason to see the movies usually.
Yep.
You know, like Julie and Julia. It's a perfectly good movie and she's extraordinary in it.
Yeah.
It's complicated. Okay movie the same year as Julie and Julia, but she's extraordinary in it.
Is she in that movie? I thought that was Diane Keaton.
No, no, that's Something's Gotta Give. Alec Baldwin cups Meryl Streep's vagina in It's Complicated. And he says, "Home sweet home." I find It's Complicated
Alec
to be...
Baldwin, as much as I've enjoyed some of his on-screen performances, has to be one of the creepiest people.
It's Complicated is such a fun watch. I think it's highly enjoyable. Alec Baldwin blows pot smoke in John Krasinski's face in that movie.
I think the name is spot on at this point with how you've described it. My enjoyment of it. It's complicated.
Yeah, there's a scene where Baldwin's got to go like donate sperm, and he goes in Streep for some reason I can't remember. Has to go with him, and she's like, "Oh, what are you here for?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm here for the support." And she's like, "I like semen. I like a lot of semen."
Okay, moving on. We have a casting director and we have an actor. Where shall we go next?
Casting director.
Yeah.
Okay. This person has similarly worked on a lot of Christopher Nolan movies, specifically Memento, Batman Begins, The Dark Knight Rises, and Interstellar. I give you John Papsidera.
Was he nominated this year for the casting director? Was he the sole male nominated?
I don't know.
Yes.
Okay, any debate?
No, I mean Nolan movies are generally pretty well cast. You know, and he did Oppenheimer, which you'll cover soon enough, and yeah, I think he's a good entrant.
All right. Finally, we get to our last entrant for the evening. That was already teased last month, so everybody should know that this is coming. But we have the late Robert Duvall, who was in The Godfather Part 2, The Natural, Apocalypse Now, and Network.
Of course.
Yeah. So we add 3 more to our list of total Hall of Famers and enshrinees. Currently, that takes us to 38, 10 for the year for 2026, and 28 last year. We still will have 4 different producers. We will have 8 different directors. We will have now 13 different actors with the addition of Robert Duvall. We still have no one in actress. We have 2 different screenwriters, Billy Wilder and Stanley Kubrick. Although, to be fair, Christopher Nolan's got to get pretty close on the writing credits here pretty soon. I probably should have taken a look at that once. But we have our first cinematographer. We still have 3 editors, 7 composers, 2 art directors, and we do now have our second costume Excuse me, I'm sorry. We don't have our second costume designer. Still have only Edith Head so far in that category as one of our original entrants from 2025. And we now have our second casting director to go along with Mary Vernew. So, yeah, good rounded list still coming out. If only we could fill out that last major category. But someday. The closest person, since everyone keeps asking about it, is Julia Roberts.
Okay.
We did Pretty Woman, we did Aaron Brockovich, and we did 2 Oceans movies.
All right, so you're at 4.
Correct. She's at 4. We got to get to that 5th one with her. So the most likely candidate is a movie that I can't stand, Notting Hill.
That's a nice movie, Tom. Come on.
It's my problem with 90s Hugh Grant.
You could have done Hook this year, and that'd be 35th anniversary. Could have gotten her in there. Not a good performance, but...
Yeah, that was right around the whole Jason Patrick thing, so... Right. Anyway.
No. Jason Patrick was later, wasn't he? It was around the Kiefer time.
Yeah, but she ran away with Jason Patrick.
Oh, yeah, that's... God.
She left Kiefer at the altar to run away with his best friend, Jason Patrick. Meanwhile, she was in a fight with Steven Spielberg, which, as everyone knows, if you really want to get ahead in Hollywood, you fight with Steven Spielberg.
I think they made amends now. It all happened too fast for her, and the spotlight was just... I mean, Notting Hill is about her fame. It's about
I know.
her dealing with the fact that she's,
But it's a ridiculous concept of a movie, and I cannot stand Hugh Grant in that movie. Same reason I can't stand 4 Weddings and a Funeral.
You're not a Hugh guy, then.
That is correct. I can't stand Hugh Grant from the 90s.
I like Hugh.
As he's gotten older, he's gotten better. But he was such a wimp in the 90s. He was too losery for me. Anyway.
He was excellent in Frosted.
I knew you were going to go with that. Frankly, I'm shocked that you didn't say that was the best movie of last year on Andrew's April 1st prank. And that's all I'm going to say on that. But
Too close
I
to home.
swear that should have come out somewhere in there. Anyway. All right, moving on. Now, if you have not been with us before for any of the revisits, again, you can go back to our original episode from season 1, which I do not necessarily suggest that you do. It at least is past the first 20 or so episodes, so it might be okay. Maybe. But it's a much rougher version of what this show has now become as we've gotten in better equipment and are not recording on Skype anymore. And so, yeah, it's a much more professional outfit than it was 6 years ago.
It's a little more well-researched now, too, I think.
Yeah.
More well-researched, yeah.
Yeah, we were doing it kind of by the skin of our teeth. We were just kind of talking about stuff. There was no editing. I think I started editing about the 40 episode mark. So there's less roughness overall. I leave those up and available generally for people to be able to find them. It's over 300 episodes ago, so if you really want to go back and find them, you're welcome to. But if not, that's
Buyer
fine too.
beware.
But the point of redoing this episode or revisiting this episode is really to focus on solely the Stanley rubric for this. And so by that extension, we're not going to cover most of the middle section of the show that we normally do, which is best performances, best scenes, quotes, things of that nature, and instead just jump right into the Stanley rubric. Now, we'll compare and contrast with what we did 6 years ago and whether we got stuff right or wrong. So let's just jump right to Legacy here. Originally, on the episode from, I believe it's July 2nd of 2020, a time that most people choose to forget.
My daughter's birthday.
Yeah. We had this listed as a 9. Legacy is a measurement of the legacy of the film approximately 5 years after it came out to today. So this film being, what is that now, 35 years old? 35? Yeah. So from roughly 1996 to today, what is the legacy of the film as shared between two equal yet separate groups? That would be the industry and the audience, 5 and 5 points apiece for a total of 10. Now, as I mentioned a second ago, this was a 9 originally on our episode from July 2nd of 2020. Dad, did we get that right or wrong?
Wrong. I mean, from the industry, how many sequels, how many TV shows, how many things have been done since about this? Not to mention the fact that it pretty much cemented Hopkins as one of the great actors of his generation. And as far as the public, the informal office poll, everybody in the office had seen the film.
So, yeah. I don't have too much argument if you're going to give this a 10.
So it's a 10.
The notoriety of Hannibal Lecter alone, I think, takes this over the top. But even in addition to the things that I mentioned, I think CBS had a Clarice show, which did not feature Hannibal Lecter per se, but it was like a prequel series to even the Silence of the Lambs kind of territory. There have been more things made out of this character and this type of work that I think have developed since then. So I'm in agreement here. I'm on a 10.
I think it's inarguably a 10. I think if you covered 100 more movies, 200 more movies, 300 more movies, this is, I'd say, in the top 20. Will always be.
I think it's arguably one of maybe 30 to 40 films that I would argue is a 10 in legacy. That most people have heard of, that it's a bona fide. The Godfather's in that list. The Wizard of Oz is in that list.
You said the Chianti line.
Yeah.
Which, it drives me nuts that Hannibal Lecter calls it Chianti when he knows damn well it's Chianti.
It's supposed to be a regional accent type of thing, but...
What region is he coming from? Come on.
I understand. Are you really going to insult Tony Hopkins here?
No. Look, I will not besmirch the legacy of Tony Hopkins. One of our finest actors who obviously wins for this and would probably destroy a lot of actors. Like, everyone's going to be like, oh, he can only do that. But he just goes... 6 years after this movie, he's in Meet Joe Black, where he's playing, like, a billionaire who's this sweet, loving father in, like, grappling with death. That doesn't happen. But, no, I think a 10 easy here. And I think part of the reason it's a 10 is because you have the Chianti line, but also put the lotion in the basket. Like, think of all the different lines, you know. I think just the poster alone for this movie, so many people see it and they're like, oh my, yeah, Silence of the Lambs. Like, it is ubiquitous.
I'm rather shocked that we got a near unanimity among our office staff, because that never happens. But anyway, it's a 10, so we move up a point in that category from our original score. All right, moving to impact and significance. This is a measure similar to legacy among the industry and the audience, 5 and 5 points apiece. But instead of dealing with after the initial 5 years, we're dealing with the initial 5 years. So roughly 1991 to 1996, what is the impact and significance of this film? Dad, did we get this right or wrong? We originally had a 9 for this category.
Wrong.
Okay.
Industry's a 5. For a film of this type, non-tentpole, non-franchise, to draw where it did at that time, it even drew bigger in rental because people who didn't go to the theater rented it. It had a life of its own within that 5 years. No question in my mind, it's a 10.
So I have this listed as a 9.5 because based on the rules that we've put in place, especially me, and I try and wield these pretty much evenly, because it finished number 4, I don't know if I can move it up the full extra half point on that. I don't think industry is arguable because the amount of critical reviews that were positive, it seemed almost overwhelming in the industry. It won the Big Five. That's inarguable.
So, can I ask you a question there about that? Because, all right, the couple movies ahead of it are Terminator 2 Judgment Day,
Sure.
which is R-rated, but the kind of R-rated movie you're like, I'm going to take my kid to.
Right.
Like, my kids are not that far off from seeing Terminator. They're 7 and 9. They're probably 3 or 4 years, but still. Second is Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, which is a four-quadrant movie. Okay, I'm looking at whatever I'm looking at's got it.
Well, the worldwide box office was Beauty and the Beast 1, Terminator 2 Judgment Day at 2, and Prince of Thieves at 3. Like, I get that 2 of those are more aimed towards at least a teenager crowd, if not a young children's crowd or a family's crowd. And so they're going to have different categories. This is the more horror film. It's R-rated. It's going to be tougher to get people in. And that would be the one reservation that I would maybe give you is that for all the things that were working against it, because this was not an era, unlike now, where R really doesn't have much distinction to it anymore. Like, kids went and saw Deadpool. Like, they did. They went and saw Deadpool and Wolverine, and both were hard R's for violence and language and all the other stuff.
But sucks. Deadpool sucks.
Yeah, the first Deadpool was good. The third one was terrible. Anyway, but I'm just saying, Joker made over $1 billion as an R-rated movie, but that was not the fate in 1991. R was almost like a death sentence sometimes for films.
Which is why, this movie is number 1 for several weeks at the box office. It comes out in February. Awards roll around literally a year later.
It comes out on Valentine's Day. What a weird way to celebrate Valentine's Day. Hey, honey, let's go watch a serial killer.
We can have a nice bottle of Chianti after. And then... But it's just one of those movies... I'm with Dana lockstep in a 10 because, but as a 5-year-old, I knew about this movie. Like I was cued into the fact that it was around, it was there, and of course I didn't see it at 5, but I saw the DVD. My parents talked about it. I remember asking my dad about this movie, being like that. What's that Silence of the Lambs movie, Dad? And he's like, you're not ready. It's a serial killer movie. And I'm like it was ubiquitous. This was a huge movie. And the fact that it wins Best Picture and it wins actor, actress, screenplay, director. One of the only movies to do it.
Well, but that's more industry. That's not the audience. What we're arguing about is the audience impact and the rest of it. I understand the stuff coming out of this movie, but similarly, there was a lot of stuff coming out of movies of this era that I think made it into the lexicon, the cultural iconography of the time, such as all of the lines from Terminator 2, which I kept repeating as a kid, even though I had no concept of what Terminator 2 was. So
I was 5 when Terminator 2 came out. I saw Terminator 2 when I was 6 or 7. I saw it on VHS. I saw it literally the next year. I didn't see it in theaters, but I saw it almost directly after it released. Where Silence of the Lambs, that wasn't going to happen. This is the fact it made the amount of money it did is incredibly impressive because it is a very narrow focused film as far as box office goes.
The problem that you're suggesting then is that you grade it on a curve, and I think that opens up too many doors overall. So what I'd like to do here, and this is rare, is I want to put this on ice and come back to it because I want to see how some of the other categories finish out.
Look,
because again,
we're going
because with revisit episodes, we're not averaging anything. We are negotiating a final thing. So because of that. I'm going to stay right now at my 9.5. You both can stay at your 10. We will come back around for the negotiation on this category once we've finished the other ones.
Is Greg Bavino hanging out? What's going on?
All right, then let's move to novelty here quickly before we take another break. This is a measurement of the originality of anything having to do with the movie, as well as the execution, 5 and 5 points apiece between those two halves for a total of 10. Originally on this one, back in July of 2020, we had an 8.75. I think we were just slightly too low. We were in the ballpark, but I have this currently sitting at a 9. I think this is actually a fairly original movie because I don't remember there being a ton of serial killer-like movies like this. I mean, we talked about this when we talked about Seven last year, that felt different and somewhat to itself, but it even then is playing a little bit off of what this movie accomplishes. It's a different movie entirely. Like, I don't want to take anything away from Seven. That is done with a different aesthetic, a different thing that it's trying to achieve. But this movie does create an opening so that eventually Seven can be made because this was popular. And I just don't see that a ton of these kinds of movies were being made yet in the early 90s. This opens the door for a lot of crime thriller-esque stuff that we hadn't really had before. And I think there was a bit of a revolution between this and the opening of like NYPD Blue and Law and Order that kind of reinvented what the cop procedural, the cop thriller, the crime thriller was at this point in time. So I have that at a 5. Where I have this just slightly underneath, and I know this is going to be unpopular, is I have this at a 4 for execution. I think this is a very good movie. I don't think it is the best executed movie I've seen. I think Jodie Foster is very good in the movie, but would she be up near the top of my best performances of all time by an actress? I don't know. It's not something that I would immediately think about. Hopkins, yes, because the character he creates is so iconic. But there are other performances in this. Ted Levine's a little campy as well. I mean, he creates an iconic character because it's such a goofy character. So among all of those things, I will take the unpopular stance here, and I will go with my 9, and I'll let you guys now lambast me for the next 5 minutes.
Do you want to go,
Danny,
or do you
go
want
ahead.
me to?
Go ahead.
Okay. This is the intelligent version of the slasher movie. This is an extension of Freddy Krueger and Friday the 13th. It's the same type of thing, only this isn't done in an intelligent way. So I do not believe it is completely original. I have it as a 4 for originality. There was also, as I pointed out, Tony Curtis was the Boston Strangler in the late 1960s. So there was at least one other serial killer movie. So there were also some made-for-TV movies, if I remember, Son of Sam and some of those in the late 70s, early 80s. So I have that as a 4. Execution, I think Demme did such a great job in directing. I thought, and Hopkins did such a great job. And I think Jodie Foster, quite frankly, it's probably the best performance she's given in any movie. I can't think of one off the top of my head that I would say is better.
Nell?
I think this is undoubtedly her best role.
So I'm at a 5 for execution. So I'm at a 9, but so we're at the same place, but different concepts.
I matched Dana with 5 execution, and I think it is inarguably one of the most perfectly crafted movies from a cinematography standpoint. I think it is beautifully lensed. It is so unique and is an incredible encapsulation of the aesthetic that Demme is wanting to achieve. Script-wise, I think it's about as interesting as a script can be, performance-wise, I'm with Dana. It is Jodie Foster is better than she's ever been. Hopkins, I don't know if Hopkins has ever been better. He might have been, because he truly is. I would say Hopkins is perhaps one of the 5 to 10 best actors we've ever had grace the screen. He is one of my favorite actors. I think he is truly brilliant. But it's just, as far as execution goes, I think it's perfect. I think I'm going to take the half point off on originality, because it is highly original, but also it is a little bit of a well-worn trope in some way now. Now, so we're talking about what comes after, but, I think I go 9.5 in this category, but if you guys really think the nines were to go, I'm not going to fight it that hard, but I think...
I'm okay with a 9.25.
Okay.
All right, so then that moves that category up a half point from its original score. We will take our next commercial break here and be right back. Before we jump back into the episode, and before we get to the Stanley Rubric in a minute, if you're ever curious about our Master Greatest Movies of All Time list that has every graded movie we've ever discussed on the show, there's a link in the episode description of every episode of this show, or you can go to RonnieDuncanStudios.com and find it as the top entry on the Greatest Movie of All Time podcast show page. That has the grades we've done so far for all 276 movies we've graded, and we continue to add more each week. Make sure to check that out as we go and follow along. Dad, I know we have a long list to get to this week for In Memoriam.
We do. Valerie Perrine, 82. American actress, Slaughterhouse-Five. Lenny, Superman. Dash Crofts, 87. American musician, Seals and Crofts. Songwriter, Summer Breeze. Diamond Girl. 2 songs you want to hum along or sing the minute you hear the name. Alex Duong, 42, American comedian and actor. Blue Bloods, Dexter, Death Valley. Mary Beth Hurt, 79, American actress. The World According to Garp, The Age of Innocence, Interiors. Chip Taylor, 86, American singer and songwriter. Angel of the Morning, Wild Thing. James Tolkien, 94, American actor. Back to the Future, Top Gun, Dick Tracy. And Chuck Norris, 86, American martial arts artist and actor. Walker, Texas Ranger. Missing in Action, The Way of the Dragon.
Okay, so going through all of these individually, Valerie Perrine has been on a movie that we covered in the history of the show. That would be Superman. Did a fine job in that movie. I have no complaints there. I would agree with you that as far as Dash Crofts is concerned, Summer Breeze is kind of a catchy tune. I remember it best from being Ted Mosby on How I Met Your Mother's guilty pleasure song. For
what
whatever
song
it's
is
worth.
that? Because I know How to Met Your Mother, but...
Summer Breeze
Yeah.
makes me feel fine.
Summer breeze makes me feel fine.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, which you clearly don't know the words.
can't
Blowing through the
remember 'em.
jasmine in my mind.
Yep.
Anyway. Alex Duong, for being on Dexter, if he was in the regular part of the show, I don't really remember him. He was kind of a younger man, so it's a bit unusual. Mary Beth Hurt, we did cover on a different show that we were guesting on for The World According to Garp, which might be one of the weirdest things that I watched last year. And the sequence where she's cheating on her husband and blowing the other dude, then bites his dick off.
She is in my number 11 movie on my CLP list.
Okay, and that was?
Age of Innocence.
Okay, it's not a film that I've seen, so I forgive me there, but without Chip Taylor, I think the movie Major League that Dad and I love so much is a completely different movie. And while his version of Wild Thing and the Trogs is not featured in the movie, it's still Wild Thing the song, So I'll give him credit for that. James Tolkien, 2 huge movies back-to-back years from the mid-'80s. Back to the Future as the principal and Top Gun as the original, I don't know, is it aircraft carrier commander? He just creates some iconic lines.
Is he Penny's dad?
In what?
Well, Top Gun Maverick, Jennifer Connelly is mentioned, like her character is mentioned as like, oh, you had this fling with a flyboy, the commander's daughter. I wonder if that's her.
I don't know. I don't think I ever made that connection, but
I've seen Top Gun once and Top Gun Maverick like 15 times.
now, to be fair, the biggest name on this list, bar none, is Chuck Norris, famous for all the Chuck Norris jokes.
Did you know that when Chuck Norris died, Peter said the God wanted to see him, so he went in and God says, well, Chuck, I want to welcome you. He goes, get out of my chair.
Okay. But I've only seen Chuck Norris professionally act in one thing, and it was as himself. So all I want to say is, for his performance in Dodgeball, thank you, Chuck Norris.
You know, yes. Chuck Norris is not going to be remembered for his acting prowess. He's a bit of a trumper, too. It's disappointing. But
people make mistakes.
At the end of the day, I think Chuck Norris was... He was a good life stream of entertainment for the 80s and 90s. Not really my tempo, but I think he you know, Walker, Texas Ranger was a great, you're on vacation, it pops on, you're going to watch it.
I never did, but sure, for some people, I think that would be a thing. All I'm saying is that he contributed to the culture at large, and provided that we seem to be in a down-facing moment for MAGA at this point in time, and I hope that continues, I can overlook what he did in his own politics. Much like, well, I guess because I just like laughing at Steven Seagal, I don't have to overlook his MAGA-ness. So that's another guy that...
You know, I do think that Chuck Norris had a little bit more of a complicated relationship with it than Steven Seagal, who... I don't know. Yeah. I don't know.
Between Seagal and Kid Rock, I mean, they become punchlines.
I mean, if you ever want a really good time, there's a supercut of somebody putting together all these times Steven Seagal's run on screen. It's good. Steven Seagal's one of the worst runners in history. He makes Ansel Elgort look like Tom Cruise.
Okay, well, anyway, now that I almost did a spit take on Steven Seagal running.
Chuck, if you're up there in heaven, I hope you one day get to do a split and then punch Steven Seagal in the nuts.
Anyway, moving on. Any additional remembrances or commentary on any of these?
No, it's a lot of people that I think had great careers, but not the top of the crop. You know, I think Valerie Perrine, Mary Beth Hurt, they're great names, but not huge people.
There are people that had very steady careers, but didn't have nearly the name recognition that we've had in some other weeks that we've been talking about. Chuck Norris is Chuck Norris to himself, and I think he's more reputation and a cultural figure than he is necessarily an entertainer, but fair enough. But regardless...
And Valerie Perrine kind of dropped off the face of the earth while I found out apparently she had Parkinson's and had to retire from acting fairly early.
Yeah.
So,
and look, being a Hollywood character actor, being somebody who pops in movies here and there, I mean, what a gig, you know? Mary Beth Hurt, Valerie Perrine, these are great things, you know? My kids are talking about wanting to do this professionally. I'm like, hey, if that's the career you have, great, because you can go out to eat and you can be a normal person, and then you make a nice big paycheck. So
we remember these here fondly for their contributions to the arts with a moment of silence in their honor. Thank you. All right, before the break, we left off at Classicness. Originally on this category, we had a 9.5 going back to July of 2020. Now, for what it is worth, this category is most notable for its playing in the gray area, per se, of whether it has aged well, not aged well, timelessness. There's a bunch of different factors to wade through. And so, because this very much mirrors a legal test, we turn to our senior nuance correspondent and senior legal analyst, Dana.
All right. Well, being a film of this age, the first thing I wanted to do was look at law enforcement and technology as far as investigation. Well, they kind of stayed away from a lot of the law enforcement aspect of it. So it's not like they were using, antiquated computers and all this and big box cell phones and all that stuff. So to that extent, there's nothing, the technology that's that bad. They were able to contact Johns Hopkins and get information, which they didn't show. I would assume, though, that Johns Hopkins had to go through and do a paper search back at that time, but still not a problem. The story itself had really this is a story of the female lead. It's just that Hopkins created a character that was so incredibly memorable that it took over. The only thing I would say that I would have an issue with is the lack of diversity among the cast. But when you consider that Thomas Harris, who wrote the book, was an African American and did not put any in the book, I don't know if I can find fault.
The best friend in this movie is a black female.
Yeah, Frankie Faison is one of the guards.
That's fair, too.
Now, granted, it's not the most diverse movie, but I do have a question, Dana, because you said this in the first one, and I went and looked, and from a visual, I don't know if he's African American. He might be.
Well,
but
that was, I saw him.
Let's not be colorists here. Move on. But okay, this is not a discussion I really want to have, whether someone is black or not, or if they're black enough or not. Let's stay away from that.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway. So I don't have a lot to take down, and yet at the same time, it is iconic. There is so much of this that the lines are still quoted. I mean, you can't even go into a liquor store and ask for a bottle of Chianti without somebody making the joke this long after the fact. So this is about as close to a 10 as far as classicness as I think I can come up with, because you could turn around and release this film in its present version today, and I think it would still be as relevant and right on mark now as it was then.
I think it was ahead of its time for its use of the behavioral unit of the FBI, and they were a consultant on this. They were working with that unit per se. But I think the biggest area where this suffers is if this were starting at the baseline of a 7 that we did, I think, for very early on in season 1. I didn't go back and listen to the original episode for this, so you'll forgive me if I don't recall immediately offhand what we were doing 6 years ago. But we've since moved the baseline down to a 6 as of last year. And so with that, I mean, I'll just go through my own math on this whole thing. It's a +1 for the predatory behavior on women. I think this is actually a fairly forward-facing movie when it comes to that, and the realistic fears that women have of just interacting with strangers in random places. It's a +1 for Bill and somewhat of the transgenderism, whether he was or he wasn't or whatever else, that looks pretty normal by today's standards and what we understand of how some of those behaviors and the confusion and all the rest of that than it probably did in 1991 for where we're at culturally. I still don't think it's completely normalized, but it is still at least understood a little bit more or more readily. It's a +1 for our obsession with true crime and serial killers. I think that has only enhanced and become much bigger, especially in the podcast era. And I think it's a +1 for timelessness. So from those 4 aspects, that would be a 10. The only thing I take off is that I think the movie has aged poorly in only one spot, and that's it's not really that horrific anymore. The way that something feels is something that we've really only talked about in the form of like comedies, but we have occasionally done it for horror. If a comedy no longer makes you laugh, it has not aged well. And in this particular aspect, because the film still maybe gives you some chills or some creepiness and has some tense moments, I think it still works mostly. But as far as the horrific elements, if you're going to label this as a horror film, which I don't think most people would anymore because it feels very tame compared to what came after it, and even by comparison to some of the slasher films that you were highlighting before. This is not Halloween. This is not Freddy Krueger. It's not Nightmare on Elm Street or any of the other ones. It's not Friday the 13th. It's not an out-and-out labeled horror film. It is a film that has horror elements to it. And I know we've had this discussion before, so if you really wanted a good deep dive discussion on what makes or breaks, what defines horror, you can find that on our Jaws revisit from season 2. But overall, I don't think that all of the scare elements work in the same way that they did 35 years ago. And so for that, I only take off a 0.5 point, but that puts us exactly at the same spot we were 6 years ago.
The only thing I would say is I don't think this ever was intended to be a true horror film. I think this is more in tune with being a suspense film than a horror film. It just had some horrific elements to it. I think this is more inclined to being Hitchcockian than it is horror. And to that extent, if you just watch the last 15 minutes, 20 minutes of the film, and see how Demme shortened up the edits so that it continued to build tension going into the long scene with Clarice in the dark, and then that was drawn out so that you weren't sure whether she was going to make it or not. I think that that is the final point of where the tension and the suspense is built up to that point. So I stick with my 10 right now. But
all right, let's throw our third score in here.
Yeah, so I think I'm easily at a 10. And the reason is, one, I would actually give up 2 points for the way that really the female experience comes into this movie. And the reason is because, one, I think you're experiencing it in 2 main ways. It's the male gaze onto the female. And you're truly watching men watch her. And Demme, from the very first true scene, when she gets in that elevator, she is surrounded by men who are so much bigger than her, and they're all looking at her. And I think what's important is your opening scene where she's running on the track or the field is her. She's in her element. She's by herself, and she can be truly on her own. And there's no gaze there. The gaze starts when she's around other people. And then secondly, when, God, I'm drawing a blank on her name, but when she does get abducted, it's the thing where she's like trying to be a good person. And she's like, I can help this guy. And she knows she shouldn't, but she does. And she's like, maybe this guy's okay. And I think that is a situation that if I saw the guy in there, I would just go help him. But the way Demme frames it, you're like, oh, she's really thinking about whether or not this is the right decision. So I would give 2 points up on that perspective as well. I think from a technological standpoint, I think Dana hit it on the head. They do a great job of making it feel perfectly calibrated to any time. you truly feel, other than a couple antiquated things, this could be any time. But I don't know how you fall under a 10 for this. I don't. It's, to me, as far as classic goes, it's up there with Jaws, Psycho, those kinds of movies.
I mean, they even explained the 10-year, paying off the storage unit for 10 years in advance so that we didn't have a very bizarre episode of Storage Wars.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't know if this is where my, kind of fear of storage units kicked in, but the storage unit's so creepy in this.
You have a fear of storage units?
Not a fear, but they're just weird kind of cavernous spaces. Our storage unit is in a building inside, and it's kind of weird to go into because you're the only one there. There's so many different units, and you're like, what's in these? One thing, Tom, I did respond to this, but you said you don't find it that horrific anymore. I'm with Dana. I don't think this is really a horror. I think this is a thriller and a suspense with horrific elements. Because the horror only really kicks in the last 15 minutes.
And this is why I wanted to wait a little bit on a previous category. I am willing to horse trade a 10 here for a 9.75 on impact and significance.
I would flip it the other way. But I'd put a 10 on your impact significance and a 9.75 on classicness.
I gave you what I'm willing to do.
I actually agree with you, Peterson, but should we give
I think this is
him?
more likely to be classic than it is necessarily for the immediate impact of the film.
All right. I can take that. It's the same
Well,
score
fine.
either way because
Yeah.
All right. So then that finishes out both impact and significance at a 9.75 and our new classicness score, which will be a 10. So already, if you're keeping track at home, we moved up a point in legacy, a 0.75 in impact and significance, a half point in novelty, and a half point in classicness. Finally, we get to rewatchability, where we will average the scores. We're not going to horse trade on this one. We originally had a 6.25. This is a very subjective test for everybody. I will start with what I believe to be the objective score, and I might be conservative on this one and a bit low. I will say we got this probably very wrong, but I have an 8.
Well, that's what I have. So,
And I'm at a 10 because I've seen it a million times. I'm probably going to watch it a million more times. And that's just, yeah.
Okay, and since we average this out, that's going to be...
8.66.
That is correct. Very good math. An 8.67, but still. All right, so that moves it up almost 2.5 points by itself there. Finally, we get to audience score on this one. For the original audience score in our first season, we had not added in the Google users yet, so we only had a 95% on Rotten Tomatoes, and that's what it has stayed since that time. So in 6 years, it has not changed at all. But the audience score on Google is only a 91%, so that does bump us down to a 9.3. So 9.5 to a 9.3 minus 0.2 points. That is the only category in which it moves down. So to repeat the categories on this one, we moved from a 9 to a 10 on legacy. For impact and significance, we moved from a 9 to a 9.75. For novelty, we moved from an 8.75 to a 9.25. For classicness, we moved from a 9.5 to a 10. From 6.25 to a 8.67 on rewatchability. And for audience score, we moved down from a 9.5 to a 9.3. The original total score on this one was a 52, and it is currently placed at number 35 on our list. Our final total is 56.97, and that would currently place it on our list. Do either of you want to take a shot in the dark?
Number 8.
11.
You're both too low. It's number 3.
Whoa.
And actually, I thought it might get our significantly higher, And quite frankly, after having seen it again after a while, yeah, I can't believe how good of a film it is. I think after you get by the initial, apprehension of it, every time I watch it, I seem to enjoy it more.
Now, it does bump Psycho out of the top 10 then, and it bumps The Dark Knight now down from originally it was a number 1 overall to now number 4. But this also marks the fact that we have revisited Jaws twice. We have revisited The Shawshank Redemption, North by Northwest, 12 Angry Men, Casablanca twice, and Pulp Fiction that are all inside the top 10. Only Rear Window, The Empire Strikes Back, and The Dark Knight were originally within the top 10 when they were slotted. So, for the most part, a lot of these revisits just keep bumping things up higher on the list.
I mean, I love The Dark Knight. I think it's a great film, but it can leave the top 10.
Based on the Rubric scoring, I think it is approximately where it should be. The current 10 would then be Jaws, The Empire Strikes Back, The Silence of the Lambs, The Dark Knight, The Shawshank Redemption, North by Northwest, which I think most people would think is the outlier, but that's more of a personal favorite than anything. 12 Angry Men, Rear Window, Casablanca, Pulp Fiction.
Pulp Fiction is probably my least favorite of the 10.
Not my favorite, but I think there would be, other than North by Northwest, I think most people would not have a problem with that as being the top 10.
I would flip Psycho and North by Northwest, and that's just personal taste, because North by Northwest has never been my Hitchcock, but that's just me.
Not having the number 1 CLP list film in The Godfather place inside the top 10 is going to be the number 1 complaint. That is currently 12th. Just saying. So, as usual, if you have any complaints, compliments, suggestions, bitch sessions that you'd love to throw at us, you can email us at greatestaltimemoviepodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on any of our socials at GMOAT Podcast, or you can find us on our website, RonnieDuncanStudios.com/GMOAT Podcast. We don't really do remaining questions much after these revisit episodes. Does anybody have any, I guess?
No.
I mean, since there are technically sequels or whatever else, but I think for the most part, this is a fairly contained story, with the exception of the Chilton plot line at the end, which I don't really need resolution on that to be, per se.
Look, I saw Hannibal once in theaters, never went back to it.
Well, the scene with Ray Liotta is just, in and of itself, is just...
Yeah. I have seen Red Dragon a few times. I do find Red Dragon pretty fun.
Okay. Well, then that takes us to the end of the episode. As usual with these holiday episodes, we try and make these a little bit lighter on my editing obligations, responsibilities. Peterson, you're not currently scheduled to be back with us again until June, but thank you for being here in pinch hit duty while you're moving and all the other stuff that's going on. But again, please remind everybody where you are, what you're working on, and where they can find you.
Yeah, so we've got a good back catalog at War Starts at Midnight, podcast there, and then psychodrivein.com. Got a good back catalog of writing there. Hopefully I'll kick back up with either of those soon.
Excellent. Dad, any remaining thoughts for the week as you try and type awkwardly around your mic?
Well, I don't know if you wanted to discuss the fact that I was at the Beloit International Film Festival this last weekend. You were there for a few of those days, too. I think I was there one more day than you. So we saw some pretty good short documentaries. I saw some pretty good films in general. We saw one that we both really liked on Sunday.
So we did not, and at least I did not see any short documentaries. We saw some shorts. They were not documentaries. Some of it was about some situations. It was still a fictionalized version of some real life events in a few spots, but it was still fictional, just to make that clarification. But that being said, I mean, I had a good time, but that weekend is usually for me supporting you having your nostalgia weekend. The Beloit International Film Festival takes place where you grew up. And so as we normally do, there was a period of time where we just drove around and let you look at what has changed around the town, as, men in their 60s love to do. I'm okay with that. You're going to be back here next weekend for the Wisconsin Film Festival in Madison, which has somewhat changed in recent years just due to the venue availability. There used to be what was an old Sundance theater chain, and then it got converted or moved into an AMC. Then the mall that had that theater in it took that away and made it into some other, I think it's now like a LL Bean or something like that. But anyway, so it had to move around theaters where it used to be contained primarily to that one area. It's now kind of moved around, but it makes it a little bit more character. You have to move more around town. You have to kind of walk and go in between places. It's more on the university as opposed to being in one small neighborhood. So it's developed some additional character as far as that goes. But I will say, I enjoyed most of the films there. There were some that I thought were better than others and middling and whatever else. However, the final film that we saw on Sunday is a film I would like to personally highlight. This is a film that, having talked to the filmmaker afterwards and then talking to him online and such after we'd left, this will be a film that is coming out on streaming. He thinks either late summer or early fall that he did get distribution for. It has won a few small film festival awards. I think he won something in Italy, and I think not South by Southwest, but he did win like best comedy, best genre comedy at the Austin Film Festival, something to that effect.
Austin Film Festival, big film festival.
Okay. But anyway, it's a film that is not being made really much right now. There are not a lot of major comedies. There's certainly not a lot of comedies with some level of frat humor to them, and not a lot of romantic comedies. And it's all of those. I very much enjoyed it. I very much would like to promote the film. It is called Do Us Part. I am hoping that we will have some opportunities to promote it here in the near future. I don't know what that will look like yet, but it is a film that I would very much like people to go out and see because I thought it was a very special film. I thought, while there are some crude moments, I thought it had a lot of good heart to it and was a very enveloping story. And I'm somewhat of a sucker already for romantic comedies to begin with, but I thought it was a very well done script that was very well influenced by its three main leads. It's apparently a stage play that was 3 people in 5 different scenes, and then they combined it. And so the same person who wrote the original play eventually developed it for the stage, and he plays the best man primary character in the film. He's also the director and such. And while I don't know if he said his DP carried a lot of the weight as far as like the film portion of things, I still think he had an idea of where he wanted the story to go, and I think it plays out very well. So if that's up your alley, try and look out for it. We'll try and re-signal for everybody when that's going to be coming out and hopefully get the word out, because I do think it is something worth watching. It's only 93 minutes, so it's really not a long type of film, but I think it goes through a lot in 93 minutes.
Yes, and quite frankly, the humor I thought was fine. It had a couple of moments where, but it was nothing that I wouldn't be or would feel uncomfortable sitting in with my in-laws or taking, at least a 11, 12, 13-year-old to see without a question. Maybe a little bit younger, there may be a couple of things that have to be explained, but still.
If you liked stoner or frat humor during like the 90s and the 2000s, I don't think there's anything that's outside the bounds of anything you would have found in a Grandma's Boy or an Anchorman or a Hangover or Wedding Crashers. All of those are within fair game. So if that doesn't bother you, or you don't, there's a couple of crude jokes, but again, I think it was only like 2 or 3 that they're a little bit of gross out humor, and it's a bit for effect early on in the film. Outside of that, I really don't think that's the main point. And again, I think the film taps into something much larger beyond just a few kind of gross out jokes. So, but we will keep everybody on the watch out for that one. If you have an opportunity to go to any local film festival, we would also encourage you to do that as well, since this is kind of film festival season for a lot of things. It's not just limited to awards time, but certainly it's an opportunity to support a lot of small independent filmmakers, sometimes some very local filmmakers, in whatever they're doing in their journey. And sometimes there's some really great documentaries. You never know what you're going to find sometimes with these films. You may be ahead of the curve finding the next great thing, and you had no idea. So if you have the opportunity, we would definitely encourage everybody to do that. Anything remaining for commentary on Beloit?
Nope. It's still there. And as I commented, I'm one of the few people that graduated from Beloit Memorial High School and Beloit College. I think last I heard, there were less than 10 of us in the 120 year, let me see, it's got to be 180 year history of the two. But whatever.
You may want to redo the math on that one. I don't think it's been
about
around
this.
since the 1840s. But anyway.
Beloit College?
Beloit
Yes.
College might have been. Beloit High School?
Well, they had to have public education at some point. It wasn't.
But that's
Beloit Memorial
around the
back
founding of the state. Universities makes more sense. But they had like schoolhouses, not formalized high schools.
then. Okay.
Anyway, regardless, that'll do it for us this week. Thank you for listening. I do wish we could chat longer, but I'm having an old friend for dinner. Next week, for our 307th episode, we welcome back 5-time club member and CLP contributor, host and creator of the Best Picture cast, Kieran B., to discuss A Place in the Sun from 1951, celebrating its 75th anniversary. Directed by George Stevens, written by Michael Wilson and Harry Brown. Cinematography by William C. Miller, music by Franz Waxman. Editing by William Hornbeck, starring Montgomery Clift, Elizabeth Taylor, and Shelley Winters. You won't want to miss that one, so watch ahead of the show by searching the Real Good app to find where it's streaming for you. That's REELGOOD. Please like, follow, rate, and review, or whatever on whichever platform you have so that more can join in on our fun. You can also email the show at RonnieDuncanStudios.com or at GreatestAllTimeMoviePodcast@gmail.com, or find us on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Letterboxd, Blue Sky, TikTok, or Threads at the handle at GMOAT Podcast. The Greatest Movie of All Time is a production of Ronnie Duncan Studios. Our show is mixed, edited, and written by Thomas Duncan. Our music is thanks to Purple Planet Music. Our distributor is Captivate FM. Our technical provider is Riverside FM.